Soon, the galaxy will be remade. The Jedi and the Republic will die.
I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi.
Great care we must take.
Why would anyone walk away from being a Jedi?
We were trained to be keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
We clones have mixed feelings about the war. Without it, we wouldn't exist.
All part of the plan. The plan. Everything is about to change. Every choice made has led to this.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This is going to be my Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7 trailer and Easter eggs for the Mandalorian series. So Season 1, they revealed a whole bunch of flashbacks and scenes referencing a bunch of events from the Clone Wars. We're going to see that play out during these Clone Wars episodes. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the Easter egg videos. I'm also doing Mandalorian Season 2 videos while we wait for episodes to get here. They're almost done filming that. As you can see, all the episodes will start airing on February 21st, that's a Friday, so each new episode presumably will drop on Fridays, but I don't know exactly what the episode schedule is going to be, if they're going to double up on episodes, or if it's going to be one episode at a time. The trailer starts with the Darth Maul narration. I know a lot of you are confused. If you never watched the Clone Wars series, I'll try to explain what's going on. But he survived being chopped in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi during Phantom Menace, then came back at the beginning of Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series, and they explain in the first couple of seasons what happens to him, how he comes back to power. But the events of this trailer are taking place right after he's united all the biggest crime syndicates in the galaxy, taken over the planet Mandalore using his crime syndicate power. Then the very last thing that we saw from him is that he was seemingly killed or hurt very badly by the Emperor. It seemed like he was trying to kill him, but obviously we know he survives, because we know later in his timeline he actually showed up to fight an older version of Obi-Wan Kenobi right before the events of A New Hope on Tatooine, and that's where Obi-Wan Kenobi kills him for the final time. But it's a much older version of Obi-Wan Kenobi and a much older version of Darth Maul. There's a big gap in his timeline between what happens during the Clone Wars and when he winds up dying before A New Hope. He becomes this really big figure in the underworld of the galaxy, head of Crimson Dawn Crime Syndicate. We saw him show up during that solo end credits scene, so that period will actually be covered in the live-action Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series. I'll talk more about that when we get more details about what's going on with that series. There's actually a couple moments in the trailer that make me think that they're actually going to overlap with some of the events of Revenge of the Sith like Order 66, but I'll get to that in a second. In his voiceover dialogue, he talks about the galaxy being remade, the fall of the Republic, the fall of the Jedi. That's probably because he finds out what the Emperor's long-term plans about Order 66 are. And even if he doesn't know exactly what the plans are, he probably just senses that the Emperor has a secret plan to kill the Jedi using the clones. Like here you see him using the dark side of the Force to tear into clone trooper Jesse's head. Jesse was one of the troopers that actually started to go crazy and figured out that there was a control chip in his head, and they almost found out what the Emperor's secret plans were. So some of the clones are a little bit different, and they do sense that something is wrong. There's some programming deep within them buried that's going to cause them to kill the Jedi. There's a shot of Bo-Katan Kryze witnessing the siege of Mandalore on Mandalore. She's the younger sister of Duchess Satine, who was a longtime love interest of Obi-Wan Kenobi. The siege itself is going to play out over the course of the 12 episodes that you see in this trailer. I believe it's 12 episodes for Season 7. Here's where we start to get to the Mandalorian crossover moments. So during The Mandalorian, Episode 8, Moff Gideon reveals he knows all about them, knows the Mandalorian's real name is Din Djarin. The information about that was only stored in the archives on Mandalore during the Clone Wars, so the Mandalorian said he was taken there by the Death Watch Mandalorians after they rescued him as a foundling and inducted him into their order. So the Mandalorian character would still be a young boy while this scene is happening, but he was on Mandalore while this was happening. Moff Gideon was here too because it's actually the Republic that's laying siege to Mandalore. So that's how he was here for all this stuff. He came later during the Great Purge. So the Great Purge that they kept referring to in The Mandalorian Season 1 is a separate event from the Siege of Mandalore. The reason why the Republic is laying siege to Mandalore is to get rid of Darth Maul, who controls the planet with the crime syndicates. They're trying to liberate Mandalore from him, and Ahsoka is a big part of that. Like, she comes back to the Republic. She left the Jedi Order during Season 5, so technically she's not a Jedi anymore, but she comes back and she helps them liberate Mandalore, because it seems like her big arc this season is having this giant face-off final battle with Darth Maul, kicking him off the planet. Now we know both of them don't die because Darth Maul is killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi many years later, and Ahsoka is still alive after the events of Return of the Jedi. I know you're all hoping that a live-action version of Ahsoka shows up on The Mandalorian in a future season. She'd be in her early 40s when the Mandalorian stuff is happening, but she is still alive after the events of Return of the Jedi, as shown in this scene here from Star Wars Rebels. The really cool Easter egg here is that when she comes back to the Republic to help them liberate Mandalore, they give her a company of her own clone troopers, and they paint their helmets to look like her face. That's why they have the orange helmets. This is also Clone Trooper Rex working with her. They have a big reunion later during Star Wars Rebels. So even though it seems like Rex is really badly hurt here, he does survive the battle. After they do liberate the planet though, they give control of it to Bo-Katan Kryze, but that's before the Great Purge. You don't see him wielding the Darksaber during this trailer fight with Ahsoka, but he does escape the planet eventually once he's beaten with the Darksaber, and it winds up on Dathomir for many years until it winds up being recovered by Sabine Wren during the events of Star Wars Rebels a couple years before A New Hope. Then she gives it to Bo-Katan Kryze, then the next time we see it Moff Gideon has it at the end of Mandalorian Episode 8. So presumably he took it from Bo-Katan Kryze during the Great Purge. That happened after the events of what you're seeing on this series here. And I know I said Din Djarin, the Mandalorian character, was still a youngling training with the Mandalorians on Mandalore while this was happening. We might see him show up in the episodes. We might see a younger version of Moff Gideon show up during the episodes. Baby Yoda would be in his early 20s when this was all going on. So without more flashbacks for context, I'm assuming based on what they told us during the events of the Mandalorian series, that he's at this point still in hiding in the Outer Rim territories, being protected by people that are loyal to the Jedi and loyal to Yoda. There's a bunch of shots from the Bad Batch unfinished episode, which it looks like they've sort of incorporated into these new episodes. There's an actual unfinished episode where it deals with a bunch of clone troopers that are quote-unquote defective and realize they're different, but they have different abilities than the regular clones. They're just way more badass. Big Easter egg here, you'll notice this is a young version of Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels with his master when he was still a Padawan. Mace Windu repeats one of his lines of dialogue from Revenge of the Sith, and then Ahsoka repeats one of his lines of dialogue from Attack of the Clones. There's a really big scene foreshadowing his turn to the dark side during Revenge of the Sith. Here he's getting ready to kill the Separatist commanders. This is Admiral Trench. Admiral Trench has died several times in the show. He's one of the more evil commanders and was also responsible for a lot of the programming for Order 66 into the clones, so he's behind a lot of this bigger plot to kill the Jedi too. This really low shot of him igniting his lightsaber, getting ready to kill him, is made to look exactly the same as this shot of him igniting it to kill the younglings during Revenge of the Sith. You also notice that Anakin Skywalker's hair is much longer in these scenes, closer to what it looked like during Revenge of the Sith. And here's a really big crossover moment with Revenge of the Sith people are wondering about because it seemingly breaks the timeline if it's not from the events of Revenge of the Sith. You see him speaking with a hologram of a very visibly pregnant Padme. And a lot of people have been talking about this because it seemingly breaks continuity because we don't know when it takes place in the timeline. We know that Anakin didn't learn Padme was pregnant till the events of Revenge of the Sith. She tells him, Anakin, I'm pregnant, and he gets really happy. So maybe he's either just totally oblivious to her giant stomach, or maybe he thinks she ate a really big lunch. or this is happening during Revenge of the Sith, and we'll see Order 66 play out during the Clone Wars episodes. This is Ahsoka on the Obadiah Moon. That's the headquarters of the Pike Crime Syndicate. They have deep ties to Darth Maul. Like I said, the big battle of this season is going to be Ahsoka versus Darth Maul. They're really hyping that up in the trailer footage. So if you haven't spent a lot of time watching Clone Wars episodes before, as long as you loosely remember the events of Revenge of the Sith, you'll be able to follow what's happening here, because this will explain a lot of what happens during the Mandalorian series on Disney Plus and give you a lot more context for what was happening in and around Revenge of the Sith. Like right at the end of last season, we actually learned how Yoda learned to become a Force Ghost and how he eventually wound up teaching Obi-Wan Kenobi how to become a Force Ghost. So like I said, there'll be a lot of crossover moments with the Mandalorian live-action series, so I'll just point those out whenever I do Easter egg videos. First episode obviously not dropping till the 3rd week in February, so I'll just remind people when we get closer. Let me know in the comments if you spotted any big Easter eggs that I didn't mention in the video. This is the way, and they just made a big announcement about the plot for The Mandalorian Season 2 and Baby Yoda. You can click here to learn about that, and click here for all my Mandalorian episode videos. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I have spoken.